So welcome everyone. I'm Ana. I did my master's here in Latin American Studies. And before we start, I want to do some announcements. So this event has the support of the Faculty of Education IT team. A big thank you to Andrew, John and Claire. Thank you very much for your help and the support of Julia and Eva Foster that will be simultaneously interpreting between Portuguese and English. So those of you attending this event online can listen to the seminar in a specific language. Please select your preferred language from the globe icon that appears at the bottom of your screen for those who are from home, in Portuguese for a bit. Nosso evento hoje conta com o apoio da Julia Spatuzzi e da Eva Foster, fazendo a interpretação simultânea entre português e inglês.
This event has the support of Eva and Julia doing interpretation.
Para aqueles que participam deste evento online, você pode
For
ouvir.
those listening online,
Você pode ouvir esse seminário em um idioma específico. Selecione agora o idioma da sua preferência no ícone do globo que aparece na parte inferior da sua tela. And to everybody, remember that this event is being recorded. The recording will be available in our website, clarec.org or cubesbrasil.org. During the event, who is following online will be able to submit your questions through the Q&A tool located at the bottom of the screen. We also invite you to use the chat to tell us where you are in the world and communicate your thoughts and feelings during the seminar. Back to the presentation, it was my pleasure to connect my friend filmmaker Vitter from London and my friend PhD student in education, Alex, behind me, which resulted after the efforts and dedication of many, many more in this event here today. This event about fake news and education invites you to engage and discuss urgent contemporary subjects that are a concern not only to Brazilian society, but to all democratic societies. This panel here today will discuss the role of education in times of fake news, and we have amazing guests who are not only studying the phenomena happening in Brazil, but also fighting against it in different forms. Our hope is to bring the debate further and draw parallels to the UK and the rest of the world. We would like to thank the Faculty of Education for having this space here today, and also the Center of Latin American Studies and CRASH, Center for Research in the Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and CUBS, the Cambridge University Brazilian Society, for generously sponsoring this event. Now I pass the word to Alex, who will talk a little bit about the work of CLAREC and CUBS.
Hello, everyone. It was my pleasure to connect. I'm Alexandre Trindade. I'm a PhD student at the Faculty of Education here in Cambridge, and I'm a member of CLAREC, the Cambridge Latin American Research Education Collective, and also a member of the Cambridge University Brazilian Society, CUBS, who welcomes you today for this event. CLAREC is a collective formed by academic students from the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge, and it aims to constitute a space for Latin America perspectives that bring together researchers working in Latin America context and those interested in learning more about them. Our key objectives, and it's very related to what we are doing today, is to make the regional knowledge production visible, share current debates linked to education, research towards the diversification and decolonization of academia. Based on these principles, and in order to democratize the privileged spaces we occupy in this institution, we intend to build a collective and a collaborative environment to promote a meeting of perspectives formed inside and outside the university. We advocated that universities should be open and committed to traditional perspectives and knowledge that are not developed within its own spaces and voices. We believe that only by valuing and integrating others' knowledge, we will be able to transform the university into a genuine environment from which arise relevant contributions to society, especially as concern social sectors whose knowledge, histories, voices have been marginalized or even erased. So CUBS is another organization that is organized this event. It's a society organized by Brazilian students at the University of Cambridge that aims to bring and promote Brazilian culture, identity, perspective at the University of Cambridge and the city of Cambridge, as well as to promote initiatives related to Brazil that contribute to democratize spaces CUBS members access in this institution. Also, CUBS welcome Brazilian newcomers to Cambridge by providing a space for students to flourish academically, socially, politically, and culturally. On behalf of CLAREC and CUBS, that are some colleagues here from both groups, we thank you a lot for being here with us in person or virtually. So now we are going to start, and we are very grateful for Haira to be here. To start this event, I'm going to give floor to Haira Gandolfi, who will be the moderator of this event today. Thank you very much, Haira. Haira is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Education in the University of Cambridge. Her teaching and research interests are science education, decolonial curricula, and pedagogy, science and technology studies, and teachers' work and professional development. She was originally a science teacher in secondary and technical schools in São Paulo, state in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. And before I officially start my part of this, I just wanted to thank Alex and Anna, especially for the amazing work you did in putting this event together. It's a pleasure to support your work in the faculty as much as I can. And it's a pleasure to be working and to support the work of institutions like CLAREC and CUBS. As a Latin American in this university, as a Latin American living and working abroad, I can only, it's very difficult to express the importance of those kinds of institutions for us doing this kind of work that we do abroad. So we are very thankful for all the work you did, not just for this event, because I know the amazing work that everyone at CLAREC and CUBS do in relation to empowering Latin American Brazilian studies and work and initiatives across the faculty and the university. So thank you very much to all the members who are here, some members at the back. So thank you very much for putting this together. And thanks for inviting me to moderate this, this table on behalf of the Faculty of Education, which is kind of feels a lot. So like Alex said, I am originally a science teacher. That's me, my heart. I feel like I am a science teacher in my heart. I worked in Brazil for many years as a teacher, and then I found myself working in this university, found myself coming to this country to talk about education as a Latin American in the UK context. So events like this, like Alex said, are very important for us coming from the Global South, coming from places like Brazil and other places in the Global South to share our experiences of education with others. So thanks everyone for coming and to listen to the conversations we're gonna have today. And as a teacher in my heart, I'm extremely happy to be having this conversation about fake news and specifically the role of education in that. As we are gonna discuss tonight and we're gonna hear from our amazing group of speakers and my not so amazing moderation towards the end, that there's an important place for education in this discussion. There's a complex place for education in many different ways. Education has been not just being used as the hope for fighting against fake news, for instance, but it's also something that suffers from fake news. We have scholars participating on the table today that are educators and are not doing education in Brazil anymore. And there are several reasons for that. And one of the main reasons is the topic we are discussing today. So I just wanted to flag that as an opening to the day. Apart from moderating the conversation and keeping time, which is good for a teacher, right? We like to keep everyone on track. I was actually also put here to give you a very brief overview of the agenda for tonight. So unfortunately, our head of faculty, Professor Susan Robertson, cannot be with us today. She had a personal problem, but she sends her apologies and she welcomes everyone to the faculty. Hopefully she can come and talk to us in a different moment about discussing fake news and discussing fake news in relation to education, in relation to fascism, in relation to the rise of populism across the world, what that means internationally. So although we are talking about the case of Brazil here, I know that Susan and a lot of us here in the faculty are very interested in understanding the international global side of those discussions. So it'd be great to hear from you here as well about that. So she sends her apologies and thanks everyone for being here and to work with us on this topic. I also want to thank our amazing group of speakers tonight. Marcia Tiburi, who's going to be the first person to talk in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to introduce her in a second. We also have Jean Willis, who's going to join us from Zoom, because now this is live. Hybrid events is a thing now. So Jean, thank you so much for being with us, even from afar. It's a pleasure to have you here. And then, of course, for some of you might know him already from earlier today, we have the amazing Dr Fraga as well, sharing his work around the coup and fake news in Brazil. So thank you very much to everyone. It's a pleasure to receive you in the faculty. Now, without further ado, I think we are ready to start with our first speaker. I am extremely happy to receive Marcia Tiburi here tonight. Marcia is a philosopher, plastic artist, and writer. She's currently living under exile in Paris and works as a professor at the University of Paris 8. She has written extensively about the rise of fascism and fake news in Brazil. She authored the book, The Psychocultural Underpinnings of Everyday Fascism, published in 2021. Some of you possibly saw her talking about the book on that table over there. And she's always happy to talk a bit more about her book because it's an amazing publication. So thank you very much, Marcia, for coming, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone, Alexandre, Anna, Haira, Cambridge University, and especially Vitter Fraga, Jean, I will try to speak in English, but if it's too difficult for you, I will switch to Portuguese, change it to Portuguese. But I will try to speak English. I will try to speak it slowly to make it easier, this conference. Then we have a common subject that is to reflect on fake news in the context of education. I think you all know Education After Auschwitz, published by Theodor Adorno 60 years ago, around 60 years, I think. I would like to begin by talking about this text because in it, Adorno says that all educational efforts should be made to overcome Auschwitz. Having said that, we can consider that all our efforts should be made to stop fake news. Why do I say that? Because fake news is a generic name for lies. I am a philosophy professor, and I have spent my life trying to understand how mentalities and sensibilities are constructed. We are beings that lives in language. And that means we inhabit three complex territories: the realm of truth, the realm of lies, and the realm of fiction. These territories are in dialogue with each other and all have cognitive, epistemological, aesthetic, ethical, and political validity. And for this very reason, they can function as weapons, as forms of power. Certainly, lies are used as a weapon, that is, as a methodology and a political technology against which we need to oppose truth and fiction. Disinformation and the fake news that feed it are a fundamental part of the construction of a propitious terrain for the implantation of the brainwashing processes essential for fascism. Fascism, as well as all authoritarianism, destroy people's subjectivity in order to better dominate their minds and bodies, and in this way, their lives as a whole. To understand the issue of fake news, we need to understand something about the establishment of fascism that happens through fake news, smear campaigns, and the whole context of disinformation that advances in the world today. This means that we all need to understand power games, and that education needs to talk about power to explain how teachers, students, and society as a whole are being victimized by power games. I really believe that the school curricula, for example, need to be dedicated to an education aimed at understanding power games in our time. This implies understanding the media, religious discourses, and the historical and political process that affect people's private and collective lives. The moral and political task of education cannot be erased. In this sense, it is important that young people and children, as well as people of all generations, are informed about the ways in which what is true and what is lie are constructed and manipulated. It's evident that the history of fascism is the history of lies and fake news. It's not possible to form lucid people if we don't show them the power games, which are language games, in the context where they live. I am in favor of a very interdisciplinary education in which we study story, philosophy, geopolitics, art, mathematics, languages, all of these at the same time, and keeping in mind that children and young people are beings open to the world and that they are capable of making relations between all these subjects. The urgency of the work of discernment is renewed in this moment in which the strategies of psychopower take over minds, and the whole scenario of subjectivity in which language is produced is under siege. I have further developed the thesis of language under siege and of fascism as a language game, as well as the thesis of the consumerism of language in the book just published by Bloomsbury. I would like to talk a little more about the concept of psychopower, because I believe that education as the formation of the human being must be attentive to it. We are under a cultural war, and within this war, there is a real operational war. It is an operational work, that is to say, an experience that works like in a laboratory. What I understand as a laboratory? The laboratory is the place chosen to implement the experiment. In this case, Brazil was chosen for this experiment, but several other countries have been joining the same process. Part of the experiment in the laboratory is concrete. It implies dismantling the institutions and the system of rights guaranteed in a democracy. In the 19 around the 19th, Moniz Bandeira said that Latin America was a laboratory of neoliberal experiments. After him, many people began to speak from this image of the economic political laboratory involving Chile and Brazil, and much later, many other countries. Now, neoliberal capitalism has a logic of a village of economies, that laboratory condition implies building parameters so that certain neoliberal practices. Basically, we can say there is a plundering of the local economies, including knowledge that is seen by the system as capital and not as something that belongs to humanity, for example. The question of knowledge is a question very important to neoliberalism, and is very important to the question of this system of disinformation and fake news, and the question of fascism. Then there is this question very concrete, but another part of the problem implies just subjectivity. It is absolutely important to guarantee that people believe the lies as if these lies were true. For this, it is necessary to put an end to stop to questioning. That is, it's necessary to remove critical thinking from circulation, because this thinking does not allow the lies to advance. That is why I return to Adorno to say critical thinking is the great enemy of fascism, and education is absolutely related to this. In analytical terms, what I defined as psychopower is the calculation that power makes about what people think, feel, and desire, about the subjective space that leads them to act, leads people to act according to the needs of the system. I refer to the capitalist system organized on disinformation that seeks to replace critical thinking in the old paradigm of truth. In very simple terms, this means how the government and the articulated powers of capitalism organizes brainwashing in an accountable manner. It is a kind of mental emptying produced by the mechanisms of conceptual leaching, we can say. In very concrete terms, what I have called psychopower are experiments made with language with a view to a specific ends in order to winning elections and reaching political power. Then I think education is necessarily could be or should be a kind of fight against this political power that touch and insist over the knowledge, over the subjectivity. To finish, I think I can tell you a little bit about this book that is now being published by Globo. The book, this book is a kind of a summary of the main thesis of the 4 books that I published in Brazil. But is this summary of this other works, but not only that. In this book, I am also concerned with finding a way out of this situation that is the fascistization of our society. And I insist on placing an ethical demand on our theoretical and practical actions. Either we build a culture of dialogue, or fascism will be the new destiny of the world. The book, this cultural underpinnings of everyday fascism, has a subtitle, Dialogue as Resistance. And this book brings several reflections trying to show the links between the ethical or subjective, aesthetic, and political levels of this. The book speaks of the social, about the social and subjective basis that produces fascism, but also of how fascism is a political technology of neoliberalism. What explains the phenomenon of Bolsonaro, himself a kind of, we can say, scarecrow on the plantation in a country choosing to be an eternal colony of imperialism and the colonizing states at the service of capital, like all of Latin America. Bolsonaro has only one function in this government, to be the puppet that calls people's attention every day and is the main operator of the manipulation of the masses. Paulo Guedes, for example, the corrupt economy minister, is the real boss of the operation of destruction of our country, Brazil. My work has been to show how the operation of fascistization works as it is an operation in language. In my book, published in 2015, called How to Talk to a Fascist, I talked about the signs of fascism in the Brazilian culture around, for example, 2013. In that book, whose theses are resumed in this book in English, I said that the hate had been invented in the form of a language game. I have been working on the relationship between language and politics, and it seems more and more evident to me that what has been called by many political thinkers and analysts in general, the hate speech is a specific language game that can be implemented through the mass media in societies just to manipulate the masses. In this book, I want to show how fascism also advances with characteristics that make it even more popular and strong for the hypnotized masses. One of these elements is the performance of machismo, which has become a real political capital in Brazil. In Brazil, screaming hysterically against political minorities, manifesting with grotesque speeches, has become a common performance used by many political men and all the people who seek fame in the era of politics reduced to spectacle. Sorry. Bolsonaro campaigned politically with he made her campaign politically with a body sign, you know, this sign, the sign Bolsonarist, using his hands in the form of a gun. The apology for the death of leftist people and the appeal to the rhetoric of communist invasion are part of the game of the rhetoric around this general hatred. This general hatred is, I think, like a new capital. A capital, the hate speech is like a merchandise that I can buy and we can put in circulation as if we are fascist. There is, however, behind the rhetoric of hatred, what I called the rhetoric of, we can say, bewilderment, like this. I think is kind of worse than this rhetoric of hatred. The project of psychopower is just to produces incoherence and produces like a delirium all the time. It's important to leave people to don't comprehend nothing. And then I think this is a very interesting part of this end game, this language game that is fascism in my point of view. Then this neo-Nazi fascism, as I am currently calling this phenomenon, is just like a language game. It is all part of a strategy in which psychopower is the role, the calculation that power makes about what people think and feel, and the actions, what people can do is calculated by this psychopower. My book was written precisely to alert and help dismantle this thing called psychopower, this system, as critical and reflective thought. Philosophy is the greatest shield against the barbarism of fascism, and we can say the same about education. That is why it is worthwhile to continue teaching and writing despite all the losses and all the horror. We must continue to fight for the freedom of thought and the expressions against its mystification and manipulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcia. I forgot to say at the beginning that we're going to have a roundtable Q&A at the end. So I want to thank Marcia for her contribution, amazing ideas around psychopower and around the notion of critical thinking that for those of us who are teachers is something that we keep talking about, we keep thinking about, and we keep going back to this discussion about what does that mean and what we can do. So love to hear some of your ideas. We have Paulo Freire's statue outside this room, which brings us back perhaps to that kind of conversation. It would be great to keep discussing that, especially how to talk to a fascist. I think that would be a very interesting conversation for us to pick up as well at the end. So thank you again, Marcia. It's my pleasure now to welcome our second speaker of the night. And that second speaker is actually joining us through the magic of technology all the way from Spain. So Jean Willis, thank you very much for joining us. I might ask some support from the tech people in the room. We're putting Jean in the big screen. We might need to get the translation going as well, right? So while we do the magical technological thing, I just want to introduce Jean to everyone here. Jean Willis is a scholar in political science at the University of Barcelona, where he researches the spread of fake news and the rise of authoritarian governments. As an award-winning journalist, he also writes about civil rights and liberties. Jean also served 2 consecutive terms as a federal MP, what would be a federal MP here in the UK. So he served 2 consecutive terms as a federal MP in Brazil before going into exile in Spain. So it's a massive pleasure to receive Jean today. And thank you very much, Jean, for contributing to our conversation. The floor is yours.
Jean. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Alex, and the University of Cambridge and the Faculty of Education. Especially, I would like to thank Vitter Fraga, which was one of the responsible people to bring us here. And thank you to my friend Marcia Chibur. It's always great to listen to Marcia. It's always difficult to speak after her for me. I am sorry for my voice. My voice is a little hoarse because I'm just coming out of a flu, and I'm sorry not being there in person as expected. Unfortunately, I had a problem with the renewal of my immigration papers. I am in exile, as you know, and because there was a delay in relation to these documents, I was not able to be there with you face to face, most particularly because the UK is no longer part of the European Union, which makes it even more difficult to go from the EU to the UK. However, I am very happy to be here with you to give you my contribution. I'm not from education, although I am a teacher and I have worked as a teacher for a good part of my life. I was a secondary school teacher, but much more as a teacher in tertiary education, and I am a master's in language and linguistics as well. And I am also doing a PhD in political sciences in the area of disinformation. So the contributions come from my place, which I occupy, and of the knowledge I have and I bring from these areas. So the first thing I wanted to think about the idea of fake news, which becomes popular from around 2016, not by chance, no, not by coincidence either, together with another term, post-truth. It seems like the University of Oxford included it as the word of the year, post-truth. And fake news becomes more popular in 2016, and especially with the emergence of Donald Trump, who becomes president of the USA. And from then on, which literally means fake news, becomes more popular. and is used more and more in the newspapers, in the TV media, in jargon, in the academia, and even in daily usage. But today, we need to understand that fake news, as we speak, and as we use it as a political phenomenon, does not correspond only to so-called fake news. Fake news is an economy of disinformation, of hatred for financial profit. Fake news presupposes an economic system, an exchange, a symbolic exchange of disinformation towards, it's important to say, that is programmed and geared towards in order to make political and financial gains. So part of the fake news, for example, of this economic system, the commodities exchanged and the meanings exchanged, fake news, conspiracy theories, insults, digital fraud, words or discourses taken out of context or put in different contexts, and also harassment through a spiral of silence. And I'm using here Elizabeth Neulen-Gruber, which is the theory of the spiral of silence. So this is what we would call together as fake news, in the sense that we're debating here, which interests us not only as researchers and academics and intellectuals, but as political activists and also as people interested in defending democracy. How does this economic system is conceived? It's conceived, it comes together when neoliberal capitalism expands to the internet, brings a new technology of communication, which is at the beginning of the 1990s, becomes more popular and commercial. So from then on, neoliberal capitalism makes use of and appropriates this technology, not only for their own means for maximizing profit, but also colonizes the internet, which had emerged with a potential, with an enormous democratic potential. We used to say that in the 90s, where I was a computer programmer, where I went to university to learn communication, we believed that the internet was liberating because it would break the means and the model of mass communication. So you had a mass communication where you had one receptor that was broadcasting a message to thousands of receptors who could not answer. And so you had this mass communication means, which is emitting these messages to the mass, and the mass is not acting through words, but through silence, which Jean Driard used to call the shadow of the silent majority. So the masses, they would say if they like or didn't like a program, if the audience would be reduced. So internet then appears as a possibility, a new possibility for communication, changing this communication, making it a circular model where the emitter is also the receptor. So the internet, like earlier technologies, produces a great and enormous impact in the old technologies. So whenever the new technology arrives, it redefines previous technology when it doesn't absorb it. So, for example, the world went through the radio era. So when television comes, television incorporates radio, bringing something which it has, the image, something new. And really, an image in movement was already in the cinema as an earlier technology, but the videotape is incorporated in the technology and swallows up the radio. And the same thing happens with the internet. Internet produces a great and enormous impact throughout all the other mass technologies. And at the same time, it converges, and all these medias and all these means come into the internet. And of course, these technologies don't change only our habits, the way that we are in the world, the way we exist, but impact our cognitive structures too. So when neoliberal capitalism appropriates itself of this new technology, which had this great democratic potential, it reestablishes our relationship with the space. I always use a metaphor, I've already talked about this before, of the ocean and the aquarium. So we had in front of us an ocean which had to become well known, to be navigated, and then the neoliberal capitalists arrived and made our relationship with the ocean a relationship within an aquarium. So it constructed these invisible walls, which stops us discovering this ocean. And these aquariums in the internet, they are the social media, the apps and social medias, or social medias and their apps. So we were gradually losing interest in navigating, surfing the internet to become users, followers, or members of certain communities. Our relationship becomes one with the apps which are already made for us and installed in our devices. These devices that we carry and we charge, which are a revolution in the sense that we bring our television in our pocket, something that we couldn't imagine in the 1990s. The idea of a worker would go to work taking his own television. Now we take our sound system and our TV and everything with us, which is constantly in this flow of communication. So the appropriation, a neoliberal appropriation, as it's also changing itself and transform itself, which Shoshana Zuboff calls vigilance capitalisms. It doesn't just only appropriate, take over the space, but uses the hardware where the softwares work, which are our mobile phones, our tablets, our laptops, and transform them in surveillance devices. To start with, it would be, let's say, a commercial surveillance where they identify our behaviors and our patterns, words that can be changed into publicity aimed at us. So platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Facebook, etc., started to collect information about us, all sorts of information in this interaction that we have with these tools. We are constantly providing them with this information, and this information this platforms, this information is used to provide us with services and products which are made to our own image, which aura within demands that we didn't even know we had, or at least didn't even imagine. And then you had this idea of having this diffuse idea that you're being surveyed by Facebook. And then suddenly you went to see something, and then this marketing appears and said, hang on a second, I thought about this and this is here. Because these platforms and devices and apps work through artificial intelligence, which interprets and make a calculation, an algorithm, and so they know how we're going to act and what we're going to want in the next minute. So this transformation from capitalism into a surveillance of neoliberal capitalism and the appropriation of this technology will lead and will demand us to become more and more under the control of these technologies. The more we use social media, the more this flow, we are bombarded and encouraged to consume. So these algorithms understood, and this understanding took place through this idea of Occupy Wall Street in 2008, and then the Arab Spring, which happened through social media, especially through Twitter. These algorithms start to understand that these interactions increase and the permanence of people in social media increases when the low emotions, the lowest political emotions are exploited. So they understood that when this brought fear or hatred, this publication brought more interaction. The more people interacted and left comments and spent more time in social media when they were scared or when there was hatred. So this communication started to modify these algorithms to suggest to us a content that would produce or brings these sentiments from us: fear, anxiety, hatred. So we started to be really within our aquariums. The algorithm started to decide which content we should be consuming. And for more, we wanted to get out of these suggestion of the algorithms, this that they send to you, this that reaches you, is what will keep you for longer in the media and will bring emotions from you and not a rational idea. And that's why we have so much hatred in the social media. And so people spend so much time and write horrible things. And if this had only an individual impact or in the lives of individuals, it would already be terrible, given the level of anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression is the very important pandemics that's taking place, apart from thinking about suicide. If we only had this impact, it would already be disastrous. It would be enough for platforms which colonized the internet, changed their algorithms. But this is not enough. The exploitation of these low political emotions started to impact on democracy itself and the electoral results, and produces effects in countries where they lived in relative harmony. And these emotions produced by hatreds and the exploitation, the electoral exploitation of these instruments results, we know, in massacres, genocide, shootings, and of course, in the rise of the worst of the human aspect of the human beings. So the idea of the far right starts to rise exactly at this moment. It comes back to rise in the world, to emerge in the world because of these reasons I am explaining to you now. So different countries start to feel or see the return of a populism tinged by fascism. We're not open fascism.
Nós temos como modelo
We have as a model, as a main model, Putin in Russia, but then we also have in Western country, Donald Trump, which from this model of communication used his campaign in the propaganda, in the marketing that he makes, he starts to generate clones in various parts of the world, building an international of the far right, which exploits these new technologies to produce polarization and allow capital, neoliberal capital, takes over the wealth and the natural resources of certain countries very easily, destroy the welfare state, and allow large corporations start to substitute the place of the state. So the state and the government is converted in these various countries who saw the rise of the far right as an armed arm to defend the wealthy. And of course, this economy, the system of disinformation and hatred for political and or financial gains, this economy has a history. So it's important for us to understand that the historical phenomena can be explored in their genealogy in a Foucauldian sense. So we can bring Adorno to understand neo-fascism or neo-Nazi fascism or the populist governments, because they bring us this idea of a cycle of authoritarian systems of the 1930s that led to the World War. So we need to look at this genealogy, which is a little of what I do in my work, where I'm looking into the genealogy, the use of lies in politics, and forces us to understand that we need to do not only this genealogy, but also the archaeology of certain lies which are taken as truth from a long time ago. So one of the big lies which is taken as truth for a long time, which served to colonial and neo-colonial projects and the invasion of countries, the maintenance of dictatorships, is the phantasm, the ghost of communism, the fact that there is communism threatening the world and that this communism makes us to bring the armed forces of capitalism against this communism. This is a lie that led to the rise of fascism, Nazism, Frankism, and Salazarism in Portugal, Spain, Italy, Germany. In all these cycles of the 1930s, the ghost of communism was used the idea that the world is threatened by communism. And we see that this lie is repeated once more. It was repeated in Brazil. Bolsonaro used in Brazil. Duterte used. Trump used it. Orban used it. Erdogan uses it. All these people, and Putin, who is president of Russia, where there really was a real communism during the Soviet Union, but Putin is not a real communism. And China, which proclaims itself communism, practices one of the most uncivilized types of capitalism. So it's important to look at the archaeologists to remove what's on top of these lies, to understand what is the origin of this fear and this manipulation. And to conclude this first part of my talk is that this phenomenon, which has to do with the world, it will take place in each country in relation with its specificities. So before we talk about the specificities of Brazil, it's important to talk, considering we're here in an education faculty, that this new technology of information and communication, that is internet and its hardwares, the apps and social medias, they produced an enormous negative impact in educational systems, in that many students are no longer happy in the classroom, or they question their teachers about knowledge which is consensual, the idea of the world being round or spheric, the shape of an egg, and that is turning around itself and is going around the sun. So this scientific consensus started to be contested by students that were watching YouTubers that used to say that the world is flat. So they were contesting their teachers with a lie, with a conspiracy theory. So we can see how these technologies are already impacting negatively the educational systems. In the case of Brazil, where we have an enormous deficit in quality education, a colonized country which spent 350 years of slavery, of economy based on the slavery of Black people and their descendants, a country where we had the birth of a republic as a military republic, a country formed by oligarchies that were formed during the colonial periods of predatory and ignorant and racist elites. Education has always been attacked. So that's why the figure of Paulo Freire, which is so celebrated here in the USA, is very attacked by this elite, because the educational system and the desire of the dominant classes in Brazil, which has inherited, has a legacy of all these years of colonialism and slavery, shows us that education is a privilege and that poor people should resign themselves to learn at most how to sign their names and to read, so that they don't become emancipated as citizens and accept slavery under another name. Because what we can see is a return in neoliberalism of slavery under a different name, the name of entrepreneurship, of free enterprise, of freedom or liberty. This is the mystification, not to allow the fact that, or for us to see that neoliberalism is enslaving people. So Brazil, who had problems with education, with low quality of education, with people leaving education early, where teachers are paid very badly, and the payment of the salary of teachers doesn't allow that person to to barely eat, let alone buying books, going to see culture, etc. Teachers in Brazil don't do this, and they don't do this because they don't want to. It's because they can't, because Brazil has always treated badly education. So a country with a huge deficit of education, when you had this culture, digital culture coming and swallowing up everything, it was obvious that the economy of disinformation and hatred, a program and directed system for making gains would be very successful. So Brazil became a lab for this experiment. And myself, just like the woman who spoke to you before me, we are victims of this economic system in a way that it's difficult to imagine the type of violence that was perpetrated against us through lies, hatred by the far right, which in Brazil rose to power, having Bolsonaro as a scarecrow and its representation. We need to be aware from here onwards. The Faculty of Education need to incorporate into their disciplines this topic, the idea of the digitalization of culture with its material, ethic, and moral implications, and above all, because these are systems which form imaginaries and liberate systems and spirits, we need to prepare ourselves to deal with this order of the world that wants to enslave us under the lie that we are exercising liberty. Thank you very much.
Is this working? Let me try. Just checking that the team on Zoom can hear me okay. Just to check if this is back.
Agora sim.
Yeah, John, I think you're saying hi or yes, means that you can hear me. Okay, that's great. So thank you very much, John, for your amazing presentation. It brought me so many follow-up questions that I'm going to perhaps put to the table. But one thing that I feel that is extremely important for us academics in social sciences, in humanities, in education specifically, but also in the hard sciences, if we want, working in fields of natural sciences, technology, is to think about what is our role in this kind of situation. What is the role of technologies? What is the role of us working with technologies, with science, with people, with societies, with culture in these discussions that Jean put for us? And I can already say that I'm going to bring a question to the table in relation to what does it mean to be an academic in this scenario, no matter which area you work, no matter if you work more closely to society or if you work more closely to a lab that is self-contained. What does that mean for us working in knowledge production, in knowledge development, working in knowledge teaching, to work in a scenario where, like Jean mentioned, we have a policing kind of system around our professions of people who speak to other people and produce knowledge for several different reasons. So I'm going to bring that back in a couple of minutes when we come back to the table in the discussions. I just wanted to put that forward for you to keep thinking. And in the notion, in this idea of producing knowledge and producing information, I want to welcome our third speaker of the night, Vitter Fraga, who is going to talk to us a little bit about the work he has been doing as a filmmaker around this topic and in this idea of communicating what is happening in Brazil, what is happening more globally, and engaging with the pitfalls that might come from putting yourself out there and talking about this area, this work on fascism, this work around fake news in a scenario of an actually authoritarian government. So thank you very much, Vitter. So just to give you a sense of who Vitter is, because he's a very prolific filmmaker. So Vitter is an Anglo-Brazilian journalist and filmmaker. He's the founder and director of the D Movies, the portal for thought-provoking cinema. And he co-directed the documentary, The Coup, the Factory, about the role of media manipulation and fake news in the collapse of Brazilian democracy and the rise of neo-fascism. So thank you very much again, Vitter, for contributing to our event tonight. And it's a pleasure to have you here. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Haira. Well, I feel really, really humbled and also a little bit daunted after talking after two huge titans. And I'm a journalist. Journalist knows very little. We investigate something over there, then we go somewhere else. But I do think we play a pivotal role all the same. I strongly believe cinema is not merely entertainment. Cinema is a very powerful hegemonic tool. Cinema is not a tranquilizer where you sit back and absorb it. You may do as well, but you're being manipulated, and manipulation mandates that the person that's being manipulated is not aware of the manipulation. So I believe in cinema that hits you like a ton of bricks. Cinema that makes you think. I'm not a very prolific filmmaker, actually. This is my very first film. It took me and Van sitting over there 4 years to make it. So we have worked very, very hard, and I do plan to make a lot of films. I've already finished my second one, but this is my first one. But what I wanted to say, this film is an educational tool. It's not a piece of entertainment. It's a film that should teach some lessons so that we don't perpetuate the errors of the past. Some of you were here earlier and they watched the film in its entirety. I'm going to show a short extract from the film, 4 to 5 minutes, and then I'm going to say a couple of words about it. So roll the tape.
Let's do the tech magic again.
Aí a Globo entregou e esse calorão, a gente, a extrema-direita, que neve e que toma o controle. A Globo foi o papel principal, só que a Globo errou, ela exagerou na voz. Porque ela foi estimulando isso, e essa demonização da política, essa satanização de tudo que é coisa pública, é perigoso, porque isso também se volta contra o jornalismo. E se volta contra determinadas coisas que a Globo faz. Você pegar a cobertura jornalística, uma cobertura totalmente partidarizada, politizada. A Globo é um partido político na cobertura jornalística. A mídia brasileira é o zer e dizer e mentira. A mídia brasileira criou o crime, só para pegar mais recente, para não ir na origem, mais recente. No golpe de 64, a mídia brasileira criou um medo do comunismo. O comunismo no Brasil, não tinha nada de comunismo. A mídia brasileira estimulou as marchas com Deus, pela família, pela propriedade. É a mesma coisa que agora. Nas marchas com Deus, pela família e pela propriedade, as placas eram Patacuba, em defesa da família. A mesmíssima coisa agora. Estimulou mentiras. Envenenou a sociedade, contaminou a sociedade e contaminou esse setor comunista da sociedade.
todos os noticiários antipetistas. Hoje, no Brasil, o antipetismo é como o antissemitismo. O ódio ao PT é tão imenso que, quando eu me filiei ao PT, as pessoas ficaram com medo, as pessoas minhas amigas, as pessoas diziam: nossa, você não deve fazer uma coisa dessa, você vai ser vítima de mais ódio, sendo antifascista, sendo mulher, e agora petista, sofre muito. Nós temos duas posições extremamente golpistas. A escravidão acha que a questão social tem que ser resolvida com violência e depressão. E a ditadura acreditava que para o país se desenvolver e crescer, não tinha de ter democracia. Esse processo é o processo, eu diria, mãe e pai de todos os golpes.
This was the grisly reality of the military regime. In 1990, a secret mass grave from the early 70s was discovered in the Sao Paulo cemetery. It contained more than 1,000 bodies. Among the remains of those so far identified are those of a young woman involved in the armed struggle against the military. Her parents had been searching for her body for 18 years. According to her father, she had been violated with a truncheon and her breasts had been mutilated before she was killed.
So if you look at Brazil's democracy now, although a lot of people think that Brazilian democracy has always existed because anyone with the age of 35 doesn't remember the dictatorship, but really anyone with the age of 45, because they were too young to sort of live through its last stages, which is half the population or more than half the population. It's basically the equivalent of what the US would be in, say, 1820, in terms of the fragility of its democratic institutions.
A gente está vivendo salve-se quem puder. A população pobre, os ativistas, ecologistas, que lutam pela reforma agrária, estão sendo mortos pelo Brasil afora. Marielle foi morta aqui no Brasil, e era uma mulher da política, uma ativista negra, feminista, que lutava pelos valores mais caros da democracia, uma grande pessoa que foi exterminada por um jogo.
Sorry, Marcia, for cutting you right bang in the middle. I feel really, really awful, but then I have another reason to invite you to come on the 29th to see the entire film. There will be a debate with Jean, with Marcia, victims of fake news in Brazil, and there will be victims of fake news in this country. So Jeremy Corbyn will be there, and Baroness Christine Blower, who is a member, she's in the House of Lords. She's an anti-fascist campaigner in the House of Lords. And the BFI is a very prestigious, very conservative organization. So we had to fight a lot to get that screening in there. So why did I want to show you these little extracts? I wanted to talk about a few different things. First of all, the fear of communistization, which has been creeping throughout the history of Brazil. In the 60s, we had a coup to save us from communistization. And it's all back now. And we had the Workers' Party in power for 13 years, and they're saying they're coming, they're going to turn Brazil into a communist country. The Workers' Party is but a center-left party, has even embraced some very implemented some very neoliberal strategies, raised a lot of heads. And I think it's not very different in here. I'm going to read to you. This is from 17th of June 2020 in the UK. The government has ordered schools in England not to use resources from organizations which have expressed the desire to end capitalism. The Department for Education guidance issued on Tuesday for school leaders and teachers involved in setting the relationship sex and health curriculum characterized anti-capitalism as an extreme political stance, and it equated it with opposition to freedom of speech, anti-Semitism, and the endorsement of illegal activity. So I think the writing is on the wall. What we're seeing in Brazil is not exclusive. There are many parallels on both sides of the Atlantic. People say there has been no dictatorship in Brazil. That woman clearly said that after we saw a video about the bones. Bolsonaro once joked about the bones. People were searching for the bones of people killed by the dictatorship. And he said, what are dogs? What are you doing seeking bones? So that's the level of perversion you get. And a lot of people believe there was no dictatorship. A lot of people are too young to remember that there was a dictatorship. And a lot of people don't believe fascism would really destroy democracy. Yeah? More than often, more than once, many times. I've heard people say, oh no, he's not going to do that. Bolsonaro is not that bad. So people really underestimate the power of the fascist forces. Yes, and this is really through a perversion, a misunderstanding of education. First of all, the understanding that communism or anything that's anti-capitalistic, that's critical of the establishment, is toxic. We've seen the near criminalization of the Antifa movements, which is a huge perversion. I mean, we want a war against fascists, but now anti-fascists are being criminalized. So the point I want to make as a journalist, and I don't like to speak for too long because I allow my film. It's not just my film, it's a film by Barney as well. We're sitting over there. Oops, no, he's vanished.
No.
Oh no, oh no. Both of us worked very hard on it. So I really hope you can come on Sunday. If you're in London, the film will eventually be available for streaming. That's my little contribution as a journalist. As a Brazilian journalist living in the UK, reminding people in Brazil that the phenomenon is being observed from outside, but also telling people in the UK what's happening in Brazil could happen over here as well. So that's my duty, and I'm very glad you're here listening to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Victor. You actually helped me open the door to something that I wanted to bring to the table, so that's going to be brilliant. And thanks everyone for listening. Given the time, we are now coming back to the table, and we are going to open the table for questions. So we are going to have some questions coming via Zoom, via the people joining us online, and we are of course open to questions from people here. And before, so because I am the moderator, I get this amazing experience of perhaps asking my initial question just to get things started. So while you think about the questions you want to ask, I'm just going to put a question that I want to ask both John on Zoom, but also you, Marcia, and you, Victor, in relation to your subjectivity, yourself in this. And Marcia and John, you talked a little bit about your exile as a scholar, as an educator from Brazil to abroad in the movie, in the documentary. And I just wanted to ask if you could comment a little bit about what it means to be a Brazilian abroad, talking about these topics that we are talking about as communicators, as educators, as scholars, knowing what is happening. So what do you think is the role of people like us, and what is the price to be paid for going against the grain? We talk about the anti-capitalist teaching here in the UK. We see people fighting against that. What is your experience of doing that as an academic, as academics, as scholars, communicators, and as human beings? So just to put that as a starting point for us to discuss. And who wants to go first is the one going first.
Thank you very much.
It's very difficult to explain, to say, to talk about this question of exile. It's very, very difficult. I loved to speak about education and fake news, and I think to speak about myself is very hard. But I'm writing about that. All the time I write. Me and Jean we wrote a book about our experience as exiled people. And I think writing is easier to elaborate this experience that is very, very hard, because he and myself, I leave Brazil in 2018, and after we have the pandemic moment, very hard to all the people, but after I lost my father, and I didn't see my family since that year of our tragedy, a Brazilian tragedy with this government fascist that was chosen by the people, by population, by the paradox of democracy. That is a question important to us understand. And I'd like to say one thing. I live one day, day by day. Today we are here, and we have you, and we have this moment, this event, and we have Cambridge, and we have one each other, and it's very nice and life.
And very important.
Yeah,
That's great. And I think, can I just to complement, don't worry about it, just to complement, I think it goes back to, you all mentioned to a certain extent the idea of Paulo Freire and how Paulo Freire is an important scholar to this conversation that we are having. And I think one thing that reminds me, and he lived through the same kind of experience himself, and his notion of pedagogy of hope, his notion of hope and solidarity is really, I think, something that we as scholars and as people working in this field need to embrace. And I hope these spaces like the ones we are trying to create really bring us together. And I think there is something that you put together about hatred and about dialogue, which is something that comes, Paulo Freire was really putting forward in his work, like how can we come together in this scenario, and how can we empower each other in this kind of work, because I think we need each other more than ever, right?
and I think there is another thing very important, that is people that are not Brazilian. It's very difficult to us understand the Syria situation, the Ukraine, the Russia situation, the African situation, if we don't understand the culture of a country, of any country. And then I feel that it's very difficult to the other people in France, in Spain, in all the Europe, but sometimes now I think with the rise of fascism in the world, it's possible to produce this comprehension, collective comprehension. And I hope that we can have more wisdom and more reflection and more dialogue abroad, between the countries, and we need to put together our tragedy. Also, here in England, you have a problem, a lot of problem. The problem of monarchy, but the problem Boris Johnson and the rise of rights, restraint rights, and all the countries in the world. And then I think we need to fight for international kind of how can I say that cidadania, how can I say citizenship, international citizenship, a cosmopolitan citizenship. Because we need to fight together. That is very, very important to overcome this situation here and in all the world. Thank you.
Victor, do you want to share a little bit of how do you position yourself in this? Also in terms of making the movie, right?
Yeah. Well, my situation is slightly different. Differently to Marcia and to Jean, I moved to this country donkey years ago, long time ago, and I came here by choice, and I love this country. I love this country to pieces, which doesn't mean I love the monarchy. It doesn't. I'm a Republican. I consider myself British. I have British nationality. I think nationality is a very inclusive concept. I think you can be British and Brazilian and Spanish all at once. Theresa May once very infamously said, if you are a citizen of nowhere, you don't really belong anywhere. Well, I'm a proud citizen of nowhere. I love being a citizen of nowhere, and I find that very refreshing. I eventually want to do a film about media bias in Russia, and I want to draw parallels between Russia, Brazil, and the UK. And so the way I see it, my role as a journalist is to continue. I want to continue to investigate the topic of fake news and media bias. I think I'm in a fairly comfortable position. Not that everything is perfect in this country, but I don't think that they're going to come and shoot me in the head as they would in Brazil. So despite all of the problems in this country, we do enjoy at least some freedom or some physical integrity in that sense. But there are other ways of destroying people. I mean, look at what the media did to Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, you may not like him, but I think very few people will disagree that there was an orchestrated media campaign to paint him as a racist. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the man. I have a lot of reservations, but I'm not going to applaud when the media in the entire country are attempting to deconstruct him. So my role as an individual, as a journalist, and as an internationalist is to is to demonstrate that these phenomena are very similar everywhere. And when I go to Russia, I do want to investigate things in Russia in a little more depth.
Thank you. We just need to speak close to the mic so the Zoom people can also bring us. John, I don't know, John, if you want to come in and share some of that as well. Otherwise, we can collect some questions from the public.
Jean, eu não sei se você. It's difficult to reflect about exile right now. Exile is a theme in itself. It needed its own conference. But Marcia Tiburi and myself have dedicated ourselves to this task from our experience, our individual experiences. we have reflected about this condition of exiled, of being outside our land, but at the same time being present in the virtual space because of these technologies. And what does that mean in our lives, including in terms of our biological clock? How is it to act in two different time zones? I would say I'm not Spanish. I don't have Spanish citizenship. I don't have American citizenship. So I am a migrant, an immigrant that is asking for a global citizenship more and more. And this is one of the tasks that we have for this millennium, is to allow people in this world who reside in this world are treated as residents of this planet. Because if we think about the planet, we are all here. So global citizenship, the universal basic income are things we need to think seriously about. So I am from nowhere at the moment because I have two identities, which I think cannot be reduced, as Hannah Arendt said. At the end of the day, they anchor, what anchors us is our mother tongue. And this mother tongue, this language I speak and I love and in which I express myself, it was an imposed language. It was a language that was imposed in my country by another, by a colonizing country. So Portuguese is a legacy of the colonization of Portugal. So this mother tongue, which is the last place where I belong, was given to us through colonization. So I would say that the condition in this world is not a good place to be. And when you're in exile, the people who forced you into exile thinks that you should remain a victim. They don't accept that you leave the place of the victim. So these people who forced us to exile want us and wants exile to be an expression of our suffering, death during our lifetime. And even when we reinvent ourselves in exile, when we are able to reinvent ourselves as people and recover our place from where our voices, from where we speak, when we show our happiness, this is an affront, is seen as an affront. So to show our happiness when we're in exile, it's an affront. And so they tell us that we are being a tourist in Europe, without thinking about all the difficulties that we have, both in terms of existential difficulties and material and emotional difficulties. And they accuse us precisely because of this, so that we go back to that place, so that we can become and carry on being a victim and deny us the ability of surviving. I mentioned this a couple of days ago in a program which I take part in Brazil in terms of Lula's wedding. So why did Lula's wedding annoyed so much the hegemonic and mainstream media? Because that meant a victory of Lula over the political powers that wanted to annihilate him, both politically and as a person. And Lula survived cancer, he survived prison, he comes back invigorated, stronger, becomes a catalyzing force of hope and love in Brazil, and he marries again. This is really an affront, this happiness of Lula. So at first, I was hostage to the fact of the situation. And I said that these people took everything from me. They took my political career. I was a successful rising politician. They took away my friends, my land. They took over every single space where I was living through permanent fears with bodyguards everywhere. And I was, as an honest man, I was incarcerated. And then I'm going to allow these people to allow my life in Europe be a continuation of this. I said, no, I'm not going to. And what's important, this affront means that I won't be scared of being happy. We are here, we produced this event, and while participating in this event, unfortunately, I couldn't come here because of immigration, but I am here speaking to you live. I am alive. Victor is made a film. Me and Marcia did a film. We have another visual work. We have more work to do. And this is the answer we have to give to these people, because happiness is a hot weapon.
Thank you very much, John. That is extremely inspiring. I can attest to you here in the room, at least, that everyone is nodding to what you were saying. And I think it goes so nicely with what really comes for me, especially as someone who was educated through Paulo Freire, this notion of hope and love, and how to fight and how to emancipate ourselves in this global citizenship. We are doing that, we are going through that with love and hope. And I think that is an important message. Victor wanted to share an extra comment here, so I'm just going to pass that to him.
Yes, just very quickly, an anecdote. A few days ago, I went to pick up my mother at the airport in Heathrow. And as I was driving to the airport, the officer called me. I was driving. My mother doesn't speak any English. And he asked, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Maria Socorro's son. What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I live here. Are you settled here?" And I mean, I do sound vaguely British. I think anyone can tell that I've been here for a while. I'm obviously not British. So I turned around and I said, "Well, I'm British. I'm as British as the Queen." And he carried on with a very perfidious, not perfidious tone, but just inquisitive. "So what do you do?" "I'm a journalist." And finally he gave up. His tone was obviously very demeaning. He really wanted to make me feel as an alien who was harboring my even aliener mother. So, and that happens all the time in immigration. So sorry, we're talking about immigration. I just had to share this little anecdote with yourselves.
Thank you, Vitter. I think it's important that we share those experiences as well in terms of the solidarity that Paulo Freire and others scholars in this field put forward, this notion of coming together and supporting each other. So thank you for sharing. We have a question from the public here. So I'm going to share the mic so we can everyone hear the question. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. So before I make my question, I would like to make a point. So we've been talking about fake news, and we know that the owners of the platforms of fake news, they are rich and they making money. And the people who lie to make wars also are like Tony Blair. They are afraid. But unfortunately, a journalist who told the truth, who showed the world the truth, it's rotting in a British prison today. And I'd like to remind you that Julian Assange is about to be deported to the US. And I, as an activist, would like to ask everyone to sign petitions and do whatever you can do for Julian Assange, because he is actually the opposite of fake news. So that's my point I would like to make. So, and then I would like to make a question, because it's good that Victor mentioned about the anti-capitalism movements, and And we know we are living in fascism, and we know that fascism is I would say, gorillas of the capitalism. And then what I would like to ask to the panel, and my question is there any hope that we can, we can do anything with this system, with the living in a capitalism system? Do we have any hope? As in this system is making money machine, which destroyed our love, destroyed our forests, destroyed our planet, destroyed our friendships, destroyed everything. So is there any hope on that? So that's my question. Sorry about that.
Speaking of capitalism, that's the $1 million question. So I don't want if Jean, if you want to come first just for a change, or can we do that? Jean, if you want to come first, if that's all right.
Eu posso começar.
Yes, I can start. Okay, not a problem. There is something. There's a whole mythology of hope. Hope is the last of our human feelings that was in the Pandora box. When we opened Pandora box and it was closed immediately, then we had hope that stayed there when all the bad things of the world left. Hope is something we wait for. It's the word itself in Portuguese, to have hope is to wait. So I have waited less in my life. I was much more active. I was far more of an activist. I waited a long time. I waited for food that never came. I waited for toys or hoped for toys that never came. And I waited for a long time or hoped for things. And I just found out that unless we fight, things never come. So more than hope against neoliberal capitalism, there's an action, there's political activism. We need to rescue dignity of politics, and not only of representative politics, but other forms of politics, like this one we're doing today. We need to express solidarity. We need to be an activist, and that means that we will be a little bit annoying. People don't like activists because they have this annoyance, which is always reminding people that things are there. So we need to have activism that with problems that are common to us, especially people who have children, nephews, grandchildren. This is work, because this is empathy. What sort of world do I want to leave people, and what people do I want to live in the world? So if our worry is, I love my children, I want to leave a better world, so we need to engage with a better world. Your child will be much better in a world if he's gay, a lesbian, or trans, and is able to express their own sexual orientation without dying. Then the world has to be a tolerant world, where if he is one of these things, he can live without dying, or she can live without dying, because perhaps my child might not be the standard hetero person. So if I'm an immigrant or the son of an immigrant and I live in another country and I may be a person of color, then I have to combat racism, because the world I'm going to live for my children has to be a world that is not a racist world, where the police is unable to distinguish my child from a delinquent because of the color of their skin. So if you want somebody to express their religion, you need to live in a world where you have religious tolerance, where the hegemonic religion doesn't stop people being that other. So if you want to have water in the world, you have to fight against the privatization of water. So more than hope, we need to start working and fight. And why am I fighting. I never sit down and go and rest, because I've always needed to act in my life to have that which was denied to me, but not to God. It was denied to me by a few people who appropriate of the wealth of the public good as a private good, and they think that they can treat me as nothing, where I have to live of silence, of the remainders of what's left over, to live in a cupboard. And that's why I've always been an activist. And in this world that we're fighting against the far right, we need to be activists more than ever. And education has a very essential role, both the formal and informal systems. We need to be able to deal with communication, talk to people, however difficult this may be. We need to be able to open a window, a moment for this communication, and trying to find the common point, a common place. So I dismantled the whole discourse of a taxit who was against the Barcelona mayoress, Colau, but he's bombarded with information every day by the media, who are always attacking her because she wants to make water public. And then the private companies, all those companies who want to privatize, they fund campaigns against her. So the taxes that's listening to this every day, he has this idea that she was a bad mayor. And then he asked me, first he told me what his opinion was, and I decided how I'm going to approach this without losing this person. And then when he asked me if I was Brazilian, he started talking about football, and I said, let me say something. I don't like football. And I started to explain to him why I didn't like football, and homophobia stopped me liking football. So he started to explain to me things about football. And from that dialogue, from this conversation, and the fact that I couldn't live football because of homophobia, I was able to find a way to talk about the city and how she was making the city more inclusive. And she was defending a very important right and a basic right, the right to have water. And at the end of the day, I dismantled the whole of his discourse. And he said, nobody spoke to me in this way that you spoke to me, with this patience. And you're not somebody from here, he said. So it's a challenge. So there's people who are open. Some people are walls where we can't go over them. The walls are so high that we can't even reach to the other side. So we can't waste time with these people. So we need to know who we can talk to and who we can't. But if we see someone where there's a key, a hole, a window, let's use it. So we need to be activists, and we can't hope. We can't just wait and hope.
Thank you, John. That was actually such a comprehensive take into this that I was informed here that you answered a lot of the questions we had on the Zoom chat as well. So that's very brilliant. And it actually reminded me when you mentioned this notion of being an activist and this social political education, which is something that is being dismantled in educational systems across the world. Vitter mentioned the notion of preventing teachers here in the UK from engaging with anti-capitalist teaching. That was related to the Black Lives Matter movement. That was related to the Extinction Rebellion movement. That was put into place to prevent teachers and their students in their classrooms from engaging with that kind of social political learning and social political action.
Section 28.
Exactly, Section 28 as well. They were put in place to prevent people, teachers, students, their communities from developing that social political learning and that social political learning that is necessary for acting. We see that, for those of you who are familiar with Brazil, we see that with the School Without Party in Brazil, and how that was used to prevent teachers from doing the same kind of work in their classrooms. And also it was part of feeding into fake news around the work of teachers and persecuting teachers based on that. So I think that notion of the social political action, the social political literacy and learning is extremely important. So thank you, Jean. I don't know if anyone, we still have time. So if any here in the table wants to add something to that conversation about what we can do in terms of education, in terms of our work together. Just, yeah, so are you happy for me to open to other questions? Great, it's supposed to be an open space, right? So let's do that. Do you want to take the mic, please? Yeah. Thank you.
Professor Marcia, Jean, Vitter, queridos. So I have a question. I think Jean mentioned a little bit also how the lack of formal education. I think Gessé Souza and Eliane Brum, they also mentioned a lot how much lots of Brazilians are deprived of their citizenship because of the lack of education. Yet, I come from a state in Brazil called Santa Catarina that has a lot of people with formal education, and yet lots of them are voting for fascist government at the moment. But I was born and raised there, and so what I feel is that is maybe a problem of ethics, because I saw that people change it over the years. Maybe it's just an impression, so I would like to hear your opinion. Because, so, I mean, we can also discuss the role of the formal education in forming people, but basically seems to me that the notion of what is good, it has changed to people somehow. So does that make sense? So now we have elections coming up, and we know that in the 20th century, fascism ended up with a lot of suffering. So how do we talk to people again? How can we dialogue and talk to people that we can have a common ground? We don't have to agree on anything, but just have a common ground of what is good and what is good for the humanity and the world moving forward before it's too late. So I guess this is my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, Marcia, if you want to address that because of the notion of dialogue as well, which is, yeah, we have a little bit of time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think we needed to build a dialogue culture. We need this dialogue culture, and of course, education, philosophy, humanities, arts, political, economics, all of these areas could do this. And then, but I think in this dialogue as a movement, international movement, maybe like a party, like a movement as MST. But I think the great movement of our time, a great movement around very hard dialogue, and because dialogue is not a consensus, is a fight. It's anything, something with a tension, intern tension. And then I think the great movement of our time is the feminism. Feminism is the great movement. And I think if we can construct, create, or if we can progress to eco-social feminism, we will have life, we will have a future. Because the capitalism and the patriarchy are the same. We can speak about patriarch capitalism because it's the same thing. And then I think we need to combat to fight against this this monster, the system that is a system of destruction of the world and the female, women, children, nature, all of sensibility, care, all of this universe that is of the feminine issue, we can say, is our possibility to survive in this planet, but without or out of this Eurocentric, geocentric, and specific form of life. I think we needed to become indigenous. And in Portuguese, I say all the time, we needed to desemburguesar. How can I say it?
No idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcia. I know that we might have more questions to come because this is such an amazing panel. But I'm conscious of time, and I know there were some questions on Zoom that were actually answered now. And just to let people on Zoom know that the questions that were not addressed, we are going to address them soon as well via other means. And I want to thank everyone for joining us, everyone on Zoom as well. But most importantly, I want to thank the panel who were very generous with their contributions, their ideas, and their movements of hope and action with us today. I think we need that. I think we need that kind of sharing. We need that kind of these kinds of spaces where we feel where we can come together and not just talk theoretically, but also think about ways of coming together and building something for us. So thank you very much, Marcia. Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you very much, Jean, for your amazing generosity for sharing that. We know that those topics are very, very complicated topics, very difficult topics. Thank you, Jean. Everyone is saying, is high-fiving you as well as a way of thanking your participation. And to everyone here, thank you so much for being so positive and so generous. We know that these are very difficult conversations to be had, but we need those spaces where we can come together and talk. And I suppose that this can be a starting point for a lot of us thinking about the roles that we might have in our work. So thank you, everyone. I just want to open the floor very briefly for a message from Anna, from CUBS. Anna, where are you? Can I see you? There is something on my agenda that is called surprise at the end of the event. So why? I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a surprise for me. So I'm just going to open that to Anna, and she might be able to explain what that surprise might be.
Okay, Alex will start.
So what we would like today is, as Brazilian society, we are very honored to some Brazilian scholars and people come to this city also to share our knowledge, our culture, and our understand about the world. So I would like to invite people from CUBS, from the Brazilian Society, Tamara, Beatriz, Iago, and Beatriz, Ana Maria is going to talk about an award that we start today, like honor those people who are coming to our city, because it's our city now. And Anna is going to talk about this idea and why is the name of this special prize.
Hi again. So basically, CUBS, we introduced this award called the Sabia Award. The name Sabia. Sabia is a songbird and also the national bird of Brazil. It also a reminder that our wildlife and natural world in general is under threat as their habitats are being destroyed. Sabia is also a song composed by Tom Jobim and Chico Buarque in 1968, and is about exile during dark times in Brazil's history, and how one in exile misses their home country and hopes for brighter days, hoping to come back. Marcia, Jean, and some others are currently in self-exile as Brazil is once again experiencing dark times in the last years that gained force since the removal of President Dilma Rousseff and the following elections. We, Brazilians in Cambridge, were not in exile, we're just students, but we share some feelings of exile as we are far from our loved ones, which was worse during the pandemic, and concerned about the future of our country. In different ways, we are doing our part in hope to see our country flourish again and leaving behind those dark times, these tempos tenebrosos. This award, the Sabia Award, is a homage to you, Marcia, who has been fighting for a better Brazil. Sorry, I get emotional. And that we hope to find when we return.
It's a surprise. Thank you, everyone, once again for coming. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Victor. Jean, thank you, whatever you are. And thanks to the tech team who stayed behind. I'm sure there's some kind of celebration happening somewhere. So you're, of course, more than welcome to come. And thank you again. Have a good night. Stay safe. Thanks, everyone.
We are going to a pub now. You're all invited.
Yeah.
So it's tall trees, it's not far away. So let's have some drinks and some fun with jazz band and with a very good Brazilian singer, Leila Lopes.